as Indians, we work very well if there is a defined process. Okay, you follow it, and we will follow it to the T. There's not going to be any deviations. But hey, I'm going to tell you that here's a technology. Now I want you to think on how you will apply it, and that's where things break down. Because what has not happened realistically for most part, right, is how do you translate that into something that you can use it on a day-to-day basis from a work perspective? I think that's where the biggest gap is today. And if organizations encourage innovation, then those are the kind of organizations which are going to really make it big, because they're not going to be saying that, hey, you're failed, so you get out of the way. There's no collaboration. I think that's largely what's really. If you work with them, all right, the Gen Zs, believe me, they can be far better than what they've been uh, labeled as, or they've been painted with a broad brush. They can change things around if you get down to their level, and that is what is not happening in organizations. I may be 35 years of age, but if I drop to their level, believe me, they will rise up to that level also. Talk to these guys, get to their level, and it's going to be a game changer for you.
So generations are defined by two things. The first one is major socio-economic events. The second one is technological advancements. While socio-economic events contribute to the mindset of a generation, it's typically technological advancements that set the tone for the direction of human evolution over the next few decades.
Now, historically, technology has meant different things for different generations. It meant progress, opportunity, creativity, speed, and even freedom. But on the flip side, it's also meant fear, displacement, dependency, isolation, and, as we know it, surveillance.
And the amalgamation of all these meanings has contributed to the world we are living in today. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode of the podcast. Hello, everybody. My name is Lakshan. I'm your co host for this episode.
And I'm Goldie, your other co host for this episode. And this is episode 33 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. We are in season 2, folks, of this podcast. And in the spirit of the season, we have invited very interesting people with us, with interesting perspectives to share their expertise with us.
And we have one such person joining us for this episode. This person's name is Krishnan Subramanian. Now, Krishnan is a tech veteran boasting over 3 decades of experience in setting up and scaling global capability centers, driving business transformations, and leading high impact programs across diverse delivery models. He's known for his ability to collaborate effectively with C-level stakeholders and in leading multidisciplinary teams across geographies. Now, while this is undeniably, obviously, super impressive, what makes it more impressive to me is the work that he's been doing over the last 12 months. In the last 12 months, Krishnan has actively integrated generative AI into his consulting practice. He's been using it for business modeling, data analytics, and process work. He advises corporates and SMEs on applying AI in practical, measurable ways. And he partners with senior and mid level leaders to align AI strategy with business objectives. But Krishnan is also a lot more than this. He's someone who takes a keen interest in educating professionals who are over the age of 50 on AI and AI adoption. He's a fitness nut, a travel junkie, a chess fan, and someone who believes deeply in giving back to the community. In fact, he believes so much in giving that he has given plenty of episode ideas for our very own podcast. So much so that he's now the self proclaimed and universally acknowledged official idea generator for Mind the Gen Gap. He's going to be bringing in all his experience, expertise, and wisdom into our conversation today. But most importantly, he's going to be bringing in a whole lot of banter as well. So, without any further ado, a very, very warm welcome to you, Krishna. How do you feel being a part of being on this side of the podcast for once today?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Goldie and Lakshan. I think it feels fantastic. I think the conversation that we're going to have is going to be pretty awesome as far as I'm concerned. All right. And from what you assured me, it's going to be free flowing. So I think that makes it even more exciting because I personally don't like anything that is scripted because the script, anything that is scripted pretty much destroys the way I like to work. All right. Essentially. So I think it's going to be great in my opinion. So let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, Goldie, would you like to say anything before we get into the meat and potatoes of this conversation
Yeah,
today?
no, I mean, for me, if there's anyone here who's probably seemingly nervous is myself. I don't come from a tech background. I am definitely an enthusiast, but very raw and green on this end of the of the conversation. Maybe the green jacket gave it away. I'm not sure. Uh, but I'm excited because, Krishnan, everything I hear about you has always been inspiring. I follow you on LinkedIn as well, as you know. So, excited to learn from you. And, I will be asking perhaps some very non-tech related questions that could open some, you know, areas of, let's say, personal development for those of us who are not friendly with the language. And so bear with my very curious questions. That's what I wanted to say.
Absolutely, it's going to make it even more interesting. So
Right.
Right.
All right. Fantastic. So obviously, this podcast is all about generations, and you, Krishnan, are all about tech for the most part, about tech. So what we're going to be speaking about, or we're going to be starting this conversation off with, is on understanding both tech and generations. More specifically, when it comes to technology, how do each generation typically adopt a particular technology, and how is it happening right now with respect to AI and Gen AI and all the tech that's happening currently?
okay, before I get into answering that question, I want to step back a little. All right. Fundamentally, when I started my career, I was on the tech side of things. All right. I did get my hands dirty in terms of doing the coding, whether it was C, C++, COBOL. So you can imagine how old I am, because COBOL is something that not too many people hear about. But over a period of time, once I started growing in my career, technology was something which I never dabbled in as far as being hands-on is concerned. But I did appreciate the development in the technology, what was really happening in the technology part of the world is concerned. Because if I did not keep pace with it, obviously I could not have my the discussions with the clients that I was interfacing with itself is concerned. But what's changed for me fundamentally subsequent to my leaving the corporate side is that I put a wager on myself and saying that, hey, let me go back to reinventing myself or going back to uh, learning technology all over again. And that is where I honestly invested time, money, certification, and all these things in the world of AI. Because I firmly believed at that point in time that this is something that's going to be there as a next wave, if I would put it. All right. So it's been, I think I did that, I started last February. So it's been about 14 months since I've immersed myself in the technology part of it, is concerned. It's been an exciting journey, fundamentally, because there's so much to learn. And the pace at which the technology is evolving on a day to day basis is just mind boggling and it's extremely difficult to keep pace with, unlike the other waves of technology that have come and have passed through us, essentially, if I were to put it. Now, having said that, I think uh, what I wanted to prove a point is to myself is saying that, hey, you are somebody who has a mind. You will be able to use it to the right for the right things, essentially. And so age is not something which has been a barrier for me. All right. It was only the starting of saying that whether I should do this or should do that. That was what was pretty much something that I had to um, align to. But once I was aligned to, there's been no looking back itself is concerned. Now, coming back to your question, Lakshan, is that when you look at the various generations of people today and the adoption of, specifically, if I were to say the AI technology itself is concerned, from my interaction, I'm fortunate that I've had a chance to work with the various groups of people across the spectrum. So on one end, you have those who are 50 plus. That's how I would bucket it, and then you have the mid level or mid. I won't call it level. The mid, which is be around 35 to 50, right? And then we would have the 25 to 35, and then anybody less than that from an age perspective. Obviously, I think the younger lot are the ones who are catching up with this extremely fast. Because when you look at people who are changing the game on a daily basis, when you read about them and do research, it's the younger ones who are really making those changes at an extremely fast pace. Now, for obvious reasons, they have the energy, they have a mind that saying that, hey, I'm fearless. Those are the kind of things that pretty much work for them. But as you grow, I'm saying when you look at the other blocks of people in the other age groups are concerned, of course, the 50 plus are the ones who are very slow to adopt because obviously it's a challenge for them because uh, for them, the pace at which things are moving, it's difficult for them to fathom how am I going to really cope with it realistically, right? And then you have the people in the middle, 35 to 50. They know that they have to do it. Um, they are making a shift towards wanting to learn it. But what I find is that there is a huge gap, or it's a blocker. Okay, so let's say that I'm working in a manufacturing industry. I've been hearing about AI. My boss tells me that, hey, you need to go and attend a training program on Gen AI. I said, okay, fine, go there, attend it, come back, and I say, what next? And that's where the problem starts, right? Because what has not happened realistically for most part, right, is how do you translate that into something that you can use it on a day-to-day basis? One, from a work perspective, that's one aspect of it. People figure out on the personal side how to make things work, all right? But that's not it, because if the investment that somebody is making on putting you through a course, how do you make it realistic and worthwhile the investment to the organization? I think that's where the biggest gap is today, and organizations are struggling with it. Let me tell you, it's across the industry. Um, any industry that you look at, this is what is happening, and it's also happening even the IT space. IT space, you're supposed to be leaders in the thing, but they're also not figured out how am I going to look at a use case for a client who's having an issue. So largely, this is exactly what's happening as far as the adoption of from a learning perspective is concerned. Right? Yes, can I learn? You can learn it at any age. Right? There's no stopping anybody. Would you be able to do it? Yes, because the technology is simple enough to adopt it for your everyday life. Right? And why is it a little easier now than probably how things were maybe 15 years ago? Is because most people who live in towns or even villages for that matter now, they're using an app, right? Because they have smartphones, they have apps. So they're used to that concept very clearly. Now, this is pretty much what's happening is I would call it an extension of that entire ecosystem as such is concerned. So that's largely how I see things shaping up as we go along.
It's really interesting. Two things. One is that you chose to wager on yourself without considering your age as a factor, and the second thing that I heard you say is about how it's easier to learn now than it was 15 years back based on the technology back then, right? And
Yeah.
of course, I have very little context. So, Goldie, I want to throw the baton to you and ask you what's coming up for you.
Well, I mean, I firstly, you said you can learn it at my age, at any age, sorry, which I think is kind of it sums up everything that you've shared so far. You know, being a coach yourself, as I also know that's another hat you wear. I think I can clearly see the personal development in you it resonates quite
Yeah.
heavily, and this ripples through in your ability, whether it's to reinvent yourself at a time when you felt that you're willing to learn more. And then the way you answered the question about the generations, uh, in three segments, which was speed again came up in a big way. You know, like the maybe folks in their 50s are finding it hard. That it's hard to fathom. That was what you said, with the pace at which it's going. I did want to ask another question, but I think you also answered it very, very well for us, which was the challenges that they face. So I think for the young folk, because it's inherently in their blueprint almost, because they were born with it, that would be, of course, easier for them to integrate it. And they probably are even the change makers for us today.
Yeah.
So, and the mid-range folk they recognize they have to do it, but maybe they're just wondering how to, and there might be some laziness, maybe too much of a big word to use, but there is still a bit more proactive to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the elder folk. So we see the distinctions here, and thank you for answering that. I want to ask you about this idea of when we apply the technology, and you mentioned this very over the surface, and the problem that happens when the companies don't know why and where.
Yeah.
So the use cases
Yeah.
in this case, I'd love to hear about that.
Uh, so I think it's a blocker in terms of how things have evolved. This is my interpretation of it when I speak to people across the industries. That see, they know what needs to be done, all right, but they don't know how to do the transformation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where largely people are struggling with. Okay. So one of the questions that I just finished a workshop last week, and one of the questions that I ask people is, see, okay, you learn these things. Now, how are you going to apply it, right?
Mm.
And believe me, there was silence for 10 minutes. And
Wow.
and I let it ride because I did not want to step in and prod them with another question, a follow-up question. Okay.
Mm.
And I think what's happening is people are so used to somebody telling them, hey, this is how you need to use it, right? Rather than saying that, hey, here's something, can you think of how you can apply it? I think that's the shift of mind that needs to happen, which is which is not happening. Which is what something that I'm not seeing, right? Where people are not able to apply it because it is so ingrained in them saying is that no, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way. And I think it's quite probably a lot to do with the cultural aspect of it, right? More than anything else, the way I see it, because um, as Indians, we work very well if there is a defined process. Okay, you follow it, and we will follow it to the T. There's not going to be any deviations. But hey, I'm going to tell you that here's a technology. Now I want you to think on how you will apply it, and that's where things break down. All right, and that's largely what I see as to be the biggest challenge today. Uh, and it's there in most people. Okay, it's not that it's particular to a particular industry or an age group or anything, but this is consistent.
Mm.
This is what really happened.
That's fascinating. And as I had warned you both, I will be bringing in insights that are non tech related, but I think largely analogies that help me to understand what we are talking about. It very much reminds me of the educational system that I personally followed and underwent in my high school years, which was the A level British system, versus the International Baccalaureate, which is
Hmm.
extremely popular these days. My own son has done that. And there's a big difference there, which is the applied knowledge versus acquired knowledge. And Lakshan, I think in this particular argument or conversation, you might agree also that the Indian education system traditionally has also been a lot about memorizing and parrot learning versus it's moving. Of course, it's shifting, and we are seeing a lot more of that where you're being asked for two basic skills, which is critical thinking and challenging what's in front of you. So
True.
I want to sort of put that layer, to sort of describe what AI really serves us for. Yes, it's a faster, automated way to get things done, but it is artificial. Let's not forget, hence the name, artificial intelligence. We are the real thinkers. And so maybe that's something that I'm taking away as you explain to us this, let's say, challenge that the companies are facing, organizations, and what have you.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you on that, Goldie, because I think the the education system has pretty much stopped us from thinking, right?
Yeah.
And which is the biggest fallacy today, if I were to see it. It's changing, but not at a pace that it should. It should be
Yeah.
possible, right? Because um, I would rather say that's a different topic for discussion, but
Yeah.
there's a lot that we need to do as far as the Indian education system is concerned. We have to change completely. So,
Hmm.
Something that's coming up for me, I think I mentioned this to you previously as well, Goldie, which is that uh, one of my friends, this was back in 2018. It's a quarter of my life ago at this point. So back in 2018, we were just having this conversation with this friend of mine who was very much into AI and the work he was doing back then itself. And when we were speaking about AI and how the common misconception back then and it is even now, which is that AI is going to take all your jobs and all this stuff, he said AI is not coming for you. It is the idea of AI is to help you get rid of menial tasks, things that can be automated, so that you can allow your creative self, your critical thinking, you can allow yourself to be expressed a lot better. And what I'm hearing from the both of you essentially is that the way things have happened culturally, it's almost as if we kind of killed that aspect of being able to think creatively and critically. So now that AI has come into the picture, and a lot of people are able to see how we can use it beyond just we can allow the menial automated tasks to be done by itself. Very few people are able to think beyond and be innovative and creative in the way that they look at how can we approach this. I'm just reminded of this as I heard the two of you share what's coming up for you guys.
yeah, I think one more I want to chip in here, Lakshan, is I think it's a very good point that you make that came up from your friend as it is concerned. Um, but from what I'm seeing, we're still far away from here. All right, from that essentially. Because people are still thinking that it's going to solve everything that's there out there. It's not. Okay. It needs to be very clearly understood that it's not going to replace the human, right? But it's learning very fast, and that's something that we need to be cognizant of. Extremely fast. It's learning the pace at which it's learning essentially, because that's how it's been set up for. But we don't need to be daunted by that, because this is where I think as humans we have the ability to think in ways and means that the AI systems cannot do it, largely speaking. Maybe there will be a day when it comes. I don't know about that. I'm not an expert on that. There are people who call themselves as futurists, who essentially predict on what's going to happen based on data, science, and various other things. So I'm not there from that perspective. But what's worked for me? Let me explain that is there. my level of creative thinking has exploded probably 10 to 15x. Okay.
Wow.
And every day, believe me, I'm just getting so many ideas that I never thought I would be in a position to be there. Right. And and this is something which at the beginning scared me. All right, saying that, hey, is this really happening? But believe me, it's giving me the kind of what do you say, the impetus to really go and do much more than what I was expecting myself to do, essentially. So it's all a matter of how I can. So let me start. When you introduced me, I said I'm using AI for my consulting work, data analytics, and so on and so on. But today I'm gone beyond that, all right? And I'm using it for areas where I never thought that I would be able to use it, right? And that's the power of how your the system. If you really understand it, you are able to actually exploit it to your benefit. I think that is where I'm saying people need to get to. On it's a tool. You need to know how to use the tool effectively so that it is an aid for you, essentially, in your thinking process. Okay, so I don't want to brag about this, but I'm telling you that I'm working on some three frameworks, okay, in different areas altogether, completely unrelated. A framework on how to generate images, and I'm a guy who is completely zero when it comes to art. Okay, but in the last 12 months, my perception has changed completely. I'm saying today I'm reading about artists, reading about the different kinds of arts that are available in the world today, which I never had imagined that I would ever get into when I started 12 months ago. Now, how does this happen? It's just that there's an avenue, it's sparking a thought, and I just wanted to carry it along with me. All right, so that's one framework that I'm working. I'm working on other frameworks which are essentially on how to make life easy. All right, how to marry AI and coaching, how to marry AI and the consulting world. So there are many such things that I'm really working on, which I today I'm in I would just say in a position where I can share with people and say this is the joy that I've gone through. Hey, here it is, right? And and this is what is the most exciting thing for me, essentially. Okay.
That's fascinating because normally the limiting belief that one has held for such a long time would be, oh, AI is automation, AI kills creativity. So much so that we recently recorded an episode, didn't we, Lakshan, on how Gen X is having a career meltdown in
Yeah.
media
Yes.
because it's
Yes.
taking away their ability to create films, television, etc., in the traditional sense. But what I'm hearing from you, Krishnan, is on the contrary, it opens a portal for creativity on levels one cannot imagine. And I'm curious to add in a little bit here that when you were speaking, there was a buzz in your conversation, your emotional shift happened as you began sharing. And I think that's what I want to pick up on, whether there is a fear that's embedded in organizations that is impeding them to explore these wonderful opportunities. And, as you said, are they just not structured for tech adoption in the way that they really should be keeping up with? And that would be my next question, actually. What can they do right so that these use cases can be resolved in the way which is, oh, it's broken, let's fix it? No, let's work on it so that we can make it better and better as time moves
Yeah.
forward.
I think one solution, this is personally what I would normally suggest if there are no constraints whatsoever, is that I think I would tell people be fearless. All right. Because at the end of the day, if you put guardrails and you put saying is that this is the boundary that you need to work on. Uh, you're not helping essentially. All right. And I think that's something that organizations need to tell people who are in that space, saying that, hey, just go ahead and do it, kind of a thing. All right. And we're going to back you up to make things happen. But having said that, there are, of course, organizations are struggling because there's a lot of other issues that they need to manage it, and uh, a lot of organizations have not found solutions for it. So there is something. So if you take two steps ahead, you have to step one step back. So I think that's also derailing them because there's a whole thought process on how do you manage data. Is my data private? Okay. Then there's a whole discussion around biasness. So there are these other issues that is very, very prevalent, how it needs to be managed. There are no right answers for it, and this is something which everybody is realistically struggling with. But to come back to your earlier question, I think yes, people need to be fearless because I think organizations need to let their people know that it's okay to fail, all right,
Yeah.
and that's how you're going to learn faster. So I can't see it any other way, essentially.
Yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because when we even speak about coaching, we encourage our clients to challenge them on what if you fell, what would happen. And then I hear that there are clearly these governance challenges that could be occurring, but they stem from either a fear, or I'm even hearing knowledge gaps which
Yes.
are not being filled in order for the right people perhaps to take over. What's your maybe I'll let Lakshan take over now, and what's coming up for you, Lakshan, as we talk about knowledge and governance and yeah.
Yeah, so this biasness and the data security angle, it reminded me of I think the episode that we did, which was inspired by a lot of your input, the one on Gen Z and Gen AI, how they are considering a lot more about the ethical side of things because of I think one of the words we used during the introduction of this episode itself was surveillance. It just popped into my head as I'm just hearing you guys speak. But what I want to go back is into that be fearless aspect that you brought into play. Of course, it's easy to say that, but when people who are at the very top of these organizations have uh, generally, I'm making an assumption here, operated from a place of having gotten there without really having failed, uh, the fear of failing or something, um, would that not prevent them from encouraging the rest of their organization to be fearless? Just a thought that's coming up for me.
No, that's a valid point, Lakshan, because at the end of the day, it's how the organization is structured from a culture perspective. All right, if organizations encourage innovation, or coming up and throwing something which may work, may not work, but if there is that culture that the organizations do recognize, then those are the kind of organizations which are going to really make it big, because they're not going to be saying that, hey, you're failed, so you get out of the way. Okay, that's not the case. So there are lots of organizations who understand this, they recognize that. All right. So, and as you correctly said, there are people who have grown in the organizations by not failing. I'm sure they would have failed. All right. It's difficult for me to uh, figure out there is anybody who's not failed and not grown, kind of a thing. All right. Um, so that's something that they need to look internally to themselves, and they'll be lying to themselves if they say that, hey, I've never failed in my life and I've grown always. So that's not it. I think that's largely, I would say, is that it's a lot to do with how culturally organizations are structured.
So the word culture has come up a little often now. And I think with your experience, and I know you've worked with countries outside of India too. One name comes up for me a lot when I think of someone who's, in their early 60s, and we all know who this person is, Satya Nadella from Microsoft, who's a big, big enthusiast and mover and shaker of AI. Now, he's obviously not in India. So can you give us examples of people who you have worked with and you've sort of seen that spark top down, that would be like a good formula for them to incorporate it in a way that works for the organization?
Yes, I'm not going to quote names, but I'll probably quote
Maybe a case
cultures.
study.
Yeah, like cultures where it has really worked. So I can pretty much talk about a couple of people that I knew when I was I was staying in Sweden for a couple of years. All right. See, culturally, they are supposed to be one where things work only as a consensus. All right. If you're not, if 10 people are in the room, if 10 people don't say yes, things are not going to move. All right. That's how they are structured. But I did find extraordinary people, people who are very who are friends with me now, who went against the grain, and that really made things uh, turn things around quite dramatically. All right, and people whom I look up to, because I learned that in a culture where if this is the norm, they stood apart. How they married what was part of the culture, but at the same time made sure that what was right for the business and for the organization, they made the right calls. Okay, and they probably were not, I would say, in the good books most times, all right, but results showed otherwise, and that's where the progress was always there, right?
Right.
And I think that's something which remained with me for has remained with me always, essentially, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, if I were to say, is that of what not to do, all right? So this is
Yeah.
something I would follow, and then on the other side of the spectrum is, um, so I did know of I worked with the Brits for quite some time, and so I knew this gentleman, and he pretty much stabbed me in the back, okay, and. And I got to know saying that if I were to somebody do this, it's not going to be me, right? So you have two ends of the spectrum. On one hand, the guy in Sweden who really taught me how to move things, all right. On the other side, we had this British gentleman who pretty much stabbed me in the back, and I got to know about it about a year, 2 years afterwards, all right. Uh, but it still remained me saying that why do people do it, essentially? And I realized that that was not the first time that it's happened. It's a lot to do with the culture as such is concerned. And I was not the only one. There have been other people who've had that same kind of treatment. So the good and the bad, I would say. Um, and I've come out wiser, I would say, from all of this.
I think what I'm coming back to again with the word fear and fearless. Um, the Swedish gentleman clearly was embodying a
Yes.
fearless attitude, whereas the British gentleman, it says a lot about the person, right? When
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
not able to accept something, they operate from
Yeah.
fear,
Yeah. True.
which kind
Absolutely
of
true.
concludes very much I would say, the essence of what you're giving us today when it comes to incorporating AI. And I just want to, I do want to circle back to the beginning where, I'm fascinated at how you said to us, it's not age, it's the mind.
Yeah.
And so, generationally speaking, though we may have labels and brackets for so many different age groups. And yes, they have their traits and values and modus operandi. But when it comes to the context of today's conversation, Lakshan, would you say that it's really all in the mind?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was getting to as well. Because as he was talking about this stuff, I was immediately very strongly reminded of the uh, personal development angle that you wanted to bring into this conversation today. And um, what was coming up for me is another a prior conversation that Krishna and I had about one of his case studies about how. Uh, a particular what do you say recommendation that he made to this company he was working with. It took about 3 months to even be considered, and then when it went up the ladder, so to say, it kind of got stuck. I would love to hear more about that particular uh, case study if you like to share it, Krishnan.
Yeah, sure. I think this is going back to the whole culture thing, and this is where I think it's a lot to do with the organization culture and of the wrong person being in the wrong role, largely. Um, so I was working with this company where they wanted to change the way they were working, essentially. All right. So I looked at the processes and I said, hey, you don't need to do something dramatic. If you make these small adjustments, it's going to give you a delta kind of upside. All right. You're paying for it. The tool is there. You're paying for the tool. You just not. You just have to open it up, right? So that people can start using it. So you can start seeing it. You just need to make small adjustments, and you're going to see a dramatic shift. And I showed him exactly how it needs to be done. Um, Everybody was quite excited. Then, so it went. Said, no, no, we can't. We're quite excited for it. We want to really adopt it, but we'll have to send it to somebody who's sitting in Paris for the approval. I said, okay, I'm not going to be doing that because I'm a consultant. You need to run your show. And the talk happened, discussion happened. I was called into a meeting. I explained. Then um, radio silence. And then I was trying to understand what the hell is happening. Then I asked people on the ground saying, why is this stuck? And then I tried to understand who is this individual who's blocking. All right. So I was told that, okay, here's a guy who's in a role. He's been with the organization for 38 years, right? He's come from the shop floor, right? But I asked him, why is he sitting in a position of trying to approve something which is purely a technology thing?
Mm,
And no, 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 he's quite important, and it's to do with the way they work, the way they culture. It's a family thing. So last few generations of people have worked in the same organization. And I said, all that is fine, but you're not moving uh, the cheese, I would call it, as such. And if you don't do that, you're going to be stuck where you are today. When I left, approval was still not there. When I checked back casually, it is still not in place, right? And it defies logic, if you ask me honestly.
mm,
People would
mm.
not change in the interest of what's going to happen as a benefit to the larger organization. They're not able to think there. And I think this is a mentality of trying to say that no, I am the king of my
Yeah.
kingdom, and you don't step into it, kind of thing. There's no collaboration. I think that's largely what's really happening, the way I see it.
Yeah.
So
I think yeah, I mean, it's clearly AI is not the problem, it's the organization that needs fixing,
exactly,
right? Right?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And and I said that, see, the tool is there. You're going to make some very very small changes. They are all AI related. These are the tools, all right. But just to open it up, I'm saying it's taking so much time
Yeah.
because the guy cannot think beyond what he's been told, and
Yeah.
which is the sad reality of the situation.
Yeah, and what's coming up for me? One of the things that I heard you mention, Krishnan, with this particular gentleman and the company itself, is that it's one of those things that's, for generations it's been happening, and uh, this other mention of fear versus fearless, and the ability to look beyond yourself and the current and look into the future. I'm just um, the thing that's coming up for me is that it seems that organizations can actually learn a lot from younger generations, say Gen Z, for example, who are known as uh, fearless at best, reckless at worst. Uh, so, how would you kind of if you were to say something to people who are listening who happen to be leaders in organizations, or people running their own companies, what are certain things you would say you can learn from the younger generations with respect to moving forward, taking their business forward?
Let me narrate an incident. So my last role when I left corporate was changing the way we were hiring, all right, and inducting interns into the organization, right, from premier institutes. And so I went through the first batch of interns that we hired from some really marquee colleges, and I worked with them closely. And what I found fundamentally was huge amount of energy. The they're so thirsty to learn. It's just unbelievable. And that's something that really taught me is that if they can learn at the speed, even if I do it 10% of fast they're learning, I think I would be far better. But at least I can say that maybe it's 20% today, so not 10%. So that's a takeaway for me. But when it came to organizations, what I pushed for is I pushed the organization that I was doing. Hey, give them projects that are out live there, okay, which a client is struggling with you, which that somebody who's um, working for maybe a few years is struggling with. Challenge them, and it happened. Okay, so we did get projects which these guys worked on without too much of understanding of technology. They were given the challenge. Believe me, they did a far better job than somebody who has passed out of and has experience of 4 to 5 years of experience. Okay. Now, of course, we had put mechanisms in place to make sure that we guided them through the process, which was needed because they had to understand, learn some things which are completely new. So, what I'm trying to get to is that if you work with them, all right, the Gen Zs, believe me, they can be far better than what they've been uh, labeled as, or they've been painted with a broad brush that you normally hear of. It's not that. They can change things around if you get down to their level, and that is what is not happening in organizations. Okay, which is a sad reality, because people think that these guys don't know anything, and they think that I am beyond all those things. Okay, this is largely, I'm not saying there are exceptions to the rule, but this is my experience, right? But when I worked with them, I think we were some 20, 24 of us, 24 or 4 of them who had come from these colleges. And I worked with them on an everyday basis, all right? And the change that I could see in them was just phenomenal. And that rubbed off on the people that they were interacting with within the organization. Now that's the level at which you need. So you need to drop yourself. I may be 35 years of age, but if I drop to their level, believe me, they will rise up at that to that level also. So it balances out at some time. So what I'm trying to get to is that talk to these guys, get to their level, and it's going to be a game changer for you. This is my personal experience, and I will stick my neck out on that, honestly.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's. I feel like that's a good thing to kind of move towards the conclusion of this conversation, Krishnan. Goldie, I'd hand the baton to you to take us through the conclusion of this episode.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, the biggest motivation for us to have even begun this podcast was to uh, initiate a conversation which required each generation to understand one and the other. And Krishnan has beautifully explained that in his own experience, where come down to them. I think fundamentally there's a big need that all us humans require, which is the feeling of belonging. So I sense that through the hierarchical structures that are created societally, when we can break through those and see each other on the same level, which is what you've explained, right? To understand these interns and see them for who they are, and not like this. If for those of us watching, on YouTube, I mean, I have to say, it mines the gen gap.
I just want to tap in a bit. I just want to add one more thing. I think, see, you need to have an open mind, and once you have that open mind, believe me, it opens up a whole new universe, right? And that is something which I find a lot of people don't want to do that. And I don't know why. I'm just not being able to get an answer, right? As to why people are not able to open their mind and accept who they are, or anybody for that matter, all right? And I think fundamentally, maybe it's a point of research that I want to do at some point in time as to why things don't happen this way. But this is largely what I feel is that if you open your mind, you get down to their level, okay, it I think you're just going to see a different person that's coming out, both sides, you as an individual and the other person, right? And there are still those some of these interns who have actually now got jobs and they're still in touch with me, right? And I encourage that because I had told them, like, look, anytime I'm here, not here, if you need anything, any questions that you have about anything, I may not be able to answer, but I can at least say, hey, okay, I'm not able to answer this. You may find somebody else. That is the relationship that one needs to build. Essentially, this is what I firmly believe in.
Food for thought.
Yep. Yeah.
Think for the audience as well. Why are people not opening their minds? Let's leave them with that question, Lakshan, shall we?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And what we leave you with, Krishnan, is a massive thanks for being part of this episode and sharing so much of your wisdom with us. There's so much that we learned, so many perspectives that I got that I genuinely did not like consider because, I mean, only when you have an open mind, I suppose, will you be able to consider those perspectives as well. Right, Goldie?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, full gratitude to you for um, creating this space, for us to learn from you. I really value that, especially as it's one of my values. And I know that we value that here at the podcast as well. Being inclusive and absolutely diverse with all the people that we are choosing to bring on this season. So thank you.
My pleasure, and all the best to both of you for many more episodes. And I'm sure you guys are going to rock. And
Yeah.
cheers.
And I'm looking forward to more ideas from you to keep this
Yeah, that's not
podcast
going to
going.
stop. That's not going to stop. So I'm going to keep sending you bits and pieces. Going to keep nudging you because at the end
Yeah.
of the day,
Encourage our minds to open more.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess with that, we've come to the end of episode 33 of Mind the Jet Gap podcast. I've been your co host, Lakshan.
And I've been your co host, Goldie.
Thank you so much for listening, watching, and tuning in all the way to the very end of this episode.
Muchísimas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.